you've got now a curfew in Los Angeles. And our friend Eric Erickson has a great Substack today I recommend to you, focusing on CNN, although he could focus on a lot of places, and pointing out that it seems to be an inconsistency. They're saying, we don't need any help. We've got this all under control. And yet they've got a curfew. Here's what Eric Erickson writes this morning about the media coverage of what's going on.
When have you seen...
Sorry, kill that. There you go. Does Mark Thompson, the CEO and editor-in-chief of CNN, watch his own network? If he did, and I'm beginning to believe he does not, I hope he can tell me why the mayor of Los Angeles would be announcing a curfew in part of Los Angeles. I asked because Brian Stelter has been on CNN and social media insisting everything is fine in Los Angeles. The city barely realizes, oh my goodness, anything is happening, and it's just a city block or so that is problematic. Likewise, on CNN, various voices have insisted that Donald Trump sending the National Guard to Los Angeles provoked the problems. But here's Los Angeles chief of police telling people the crowd was already out of hand. The National Guard was not the provocation. The police chief also said the protesters are attacking the police and that the police are overwhelmed. Who am I to believe? On most networks, I am assured the riots are no big deal and peaceful, but the mayor of Los Angeles has declared a curfew in part of downtown LA, and the chief of police says the police are overwhelmed. Okay, so why does the president have the National Guard and the Marines out there? Does he have it because he wants to impose martial law in the United States? Well, that's what some on the left say. But there's at least two reasons why he might be doing it. One is because our law enforcement officers who are trying to conduct deportations of people here illegally, some violent criminals allegedly, some not, are being attacked. And no one in the United States could possibly want law enforcement officers to face attacks while they're trying to do their job. No one could want that. And the second reason is there is violence and property destruction going on in a major American city, and the president feels an obligation to step in because the state and local officials either can't do it or won't do it. Okay, so there's that. Then here is Tom Cotton, op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, 111. Tom Cotton famously wrote a similar piece for the New York Times that led to a rebellion at the New York Times and the firing of their very distinguished editorial page editor because he proposed something supported by 70% of the American people at the time, which is if local officials can't restore order and can't protect law enforcement officials from doing their jobs, the American military is a lawful and precedented way to try to deal with it. I recommend the Tom Cotton piece to you. Also, I recommend, if you're a Democrat in particular, you read David Ignatius in the Washington Post. I will read some of it to you. David Ignatius is saying the truth, which is this latest incident is part of a piece of a Democratic administration that had an immigration policy that was extremely unpopular and unsuccessful. This is David Ignatius. Democrats have gotten the border issue so wrong for so long that it amounts to political malpractice. The latest chapter in which violent protesters could be helping President Trump create a military confrontation he's almost begging for as a distraction from his other problems may prove the most dangerous yet. When I see activists carrying Mexican flags as they challenge ICE raids in Los Angeles this week, I think of two possibilities. These, quote, protesters are deliberately working to create visuals that will help Trump, or they are well-meaning but unwise dissenters who are inadvertently accomplishing the same goal. Okay. Lastly, David Ignatius. Democrats' mistake over more than a decade has been to behave as though border enforcement doesn't matter. Pressured by immigrant rights activists, party leaders too often acted as if maintaining a well-controlled border was somehow morally wrong. Again and again, the short-term political interest of Democratic leaders in responding to a strong faction within the party won out over having a policy that could appeal to the country as a whole. Sean, Dan, and I all agree with that. I wonder what Chuck Schumer would say, or Hakeem Jeffries. Lastly, gentlemen, of course, Gavin Newsom gave a big speech last night with some technical difficulties, but with a strong message opposing Donald Trump. So I want to talk in general about the Democratic Party and this issue, but I want to start with this. Dan, in the most superficial, scorecardy, theater criticism kind of way, who is winning the Donald Trump versus Gavin Newsom clash?
Donald Trump is winning it.
Why?
Well, look, there's two parts to this, and I think Newsom is actually winning in some regard. Trump is winning for all the reasons that you just went through, right? ICE was being attacked. Donald Trump was elected to deal with immigration, and as we talked about earlier this week, this started because ICE agents were gathering to presumably do a deportation raid or something, and a local congressman or assemblyman saw it, went on Instagram. people started coming out in the streets, right? That is the TikTok of how this started. But ICE has the right to do this. People have violated the law. I think that where the Democratic Party, like the challenge is, and it was in the New York Times article that I don't think we alluded to, is this kind of pragmatic versus extreme. Because we have not wanted to admit that there is a problem, whether it was at the southern border or that there were bad hombres here or that something has to be done, we have no solution. So our end of the spectrum is like off the chart. Trump, therefore, whereas I think some of this is extreme, looks like the more reasonable person because he is dealing with an issue that 80%, 90% of the country, maybe even 100 thinks there is a problem. So I think that, in that regard, Trump looks like he is strong. Trump, to your point, Mark, things were out of control on Sunday night. Were they out of control every day? We can debate that. But Sunday night was a huge problem.
But it's out of control enough that the mayor said there needs to be a curfew.
Absolutely. Well, look, hold on. Let me get to that. The chief of police on Sunday said,
this is only an hour show, right?
Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm just kidding. You go. You keep going.
I think the curfew is actually more to try to get ahead of this because they don't want that. So it's not.
But Dan, I mean, there's no curfew where I live. Like, they get ahead of what? Get ahead of the fact that they don't think they have the situation under control.
Mark, I disagree about that a little bit. I do. Look,
Dan,
this is a game of optics.
A curfew.
You can't have the Mexican flag
This
burning.
is America. Dan, this is America.
Mark, we have
America. If I want to go, if I live in LA and I want to go to a rave because the mayor and the police can't keep order, I can't go to a rave because there's a curfew.
Mark,
you're acting like a curfew
in New York when we fear stuff may happen.
Yeah, when we
fear it may happen. Not that it's happened.
Well, we have them. First of all, I don't know. Do we have frequent curfews in New York?
Not frequent, but this isn't a frequent situation.
But Dan, it doesn't. As Eric Erickson pointed out, and then Sean's going to come in and tell me who's winning, Trump versus Newsom. And he's going to shock us all by saying Newsom in a rout. When CNN's Brian Stelter and the mayor herself says all good here, this is not serious stuff. A curfew is not some mild, some sort of casual thing. You do a curfew when you think you have a big problem.
Mark, they have a problem. There has been violence. Yeah. I totally agree with that. And the problem and the party's denial of that is insane.
Want more great clips like that? I've got an idea. Hit the subscribe button, be part of the Two-Way community, never miss a clip. And you can always watch our full episodes, join them live, go to twoway.tv.